obviously still discovering what my process is for this, because this is the third time I've started.
Hello, welcome to March. It is a cloudy, gray, dreary little day outside after a couple days of sun. That was much needed, I will say. I know that spring is coming. Things are starting to bloom outside. You know, we're getting there. There's a glimmer of hope in the distance for some warmer weather. I don't know about anyone else's Februaries, but after the new year started, I feel like I tried to jump in head first, and I was feeling really behind and feeling like I needed to get a lot of things done all at once. And February was much slower intentionally. And I spent a week even just resting and taking time to do some activities that brought me joy and brought me rest and a little bit of just peace. And even last week, I accidentally cut my phone usage by 50%. It started because I wanted to do a screen-free Sunday and did pretty much, was on my phone very little that day. And then it actually extended into a challenge for myself the rest of the week to be on my phone as little as possible. So that was really exciting. I want to keep doing that because I feel like I felt so much less frazzled this week, which has been really sweet. Obviously, it's hard to avoid when you do things like this on the side, but I'm hoping to implement more phone-free days into my week. I was interested to see how much time was spent on things like social media versus like literally my text messages. In my brain, text messages don't count as screen time, but obviously it counts in the grand scheme of things. So I'm gonna keep a closer eye on that. I'm really curious, and I would love to just like drop my screen time by a lot. But yeah, hard to do when you use it like day to day as just your phone. So today we're gonna talk about what I read in February, which was a really good roundup in my opinion. I'm really excited to talk about my February reads. Oh, my dog is just being so cute over there. He's just a baby. I don't have any of the physical books anymore because I took them back to the library, but we got some notes on my handy dandy iPad, which conveniently I found out was dead right before this. So we've got a great cord plugged into the outlet that is up here for some reason. Midway up the wall, they said. It's a great idea, they said. Old houses. If you watched my January reading wrap up, then you already kind of know what's on this list. I feel like I read some good books this month. So the first book that I read in February was Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. First and foremost, like, this is not a book that you just pick up lightly and go into without looking up anything about it. My wife had read it first, and I knew going into it just the general vibes are not light, fluffy, fun read. And so I went into it very much being aware of that. But just so you know, there's a lot of content warnings in there that you should look up beforehand, just to kind of be aware of what you're getting into. Great book, 100% recommend, but just as a quick aside, don't go into this blindly. She published this in 1993, but it is set in the 2020s, so right now. I think it starts in 2024 and goes until like 2027, so it covers a couple years, but it was kind of eerie to think about it being around this time. So we follow the main character. Her name is Lauren Olamina. She's a Black teenager. I believe she's 15 at the beginning of the book. She lives in a walled cul-de-sac like community in Los Angeles. And it's this cul-de-sac community where there's a wall around it and it's basically like chaos on the outside. Just a free-for-all. They do leave from time to time, and I'm not gonna get too far into it, but they do leave from time to time, and basically every time they go outside of their little community, they take their weapons, they're on high alert. No one really does leave except for people who have to go out to their other jobs or go get supplies or whatever. Like, the kids are not allowed to leave, and if they do, it's like big consequences. In this setting, in this version of reality that Octavia Butler writes about, everything is privatized and commodified. So from your water, your clean drinking water, to the police, to firefighters, safe neighborhoods, etc., everything is, you have to pay for it. And actually, in this version of the United States that Octavia Butler writes about, they're about to go into an election where one of the candidates is vowing basically to make everything go back to the good old days, but, you know, people know better. Well, people don't know better, but she knows better. She is basically noticing patterns about how things are going south and how they should probably be more prepared about the future. And a lot of people are just willfully turning their heads away, kind of being ignorant to the fact that, like, things won't be going back to the good old days and they want it to. And so just way easier than accepting the reality that they might need to, like, pack up and go at some point. Be prepared for the outside world to be more unsafe and that the walls around their community aren't going to stand up forever. And so throughout the book, we see Lauren creating this religion of her own called Earthseed. I mean, it's literally called Parable of the Sower, like from the Bible. So we kind of see that parallel as well. Really interesting, really good to get into. It's like a whole other topic of discussion. This book touches on literally everything from class disparities to racism to police not doing their jobs to climate change to politics. Like, what haven't I mentioned? It touches on everything. And obviously, a lot of these things are already reality for a lot of people. So I think going into this book and going into the discussions about it, it's important not to talk about it as something that's like in the future, but also something that's happening right now for a lot of people. When I was doing some additional research about this book for this video, I saw a quote about the way that Octavia Butler approaches her books and her writing, because she's iconic. Like, she's written a lot of other sci-fi books as well. And she kind of approached it from the lenses of, what if this happened? If only this happened, and if nothing changes, this will happen. I need to check the quote. But basically, she already wrote things about the first two, what if and if only, and this was more along the lines of, if we don't change anything, this might happen, and speculating about that. And so I just think it's so interesting because, you know, obviously there's a lot of parallels that I could see happening more on a mass scale. And it's really interesting just the way that she put these ideas to paper, seeing the patterns that were happening, but also not doing it in a we're doomed kind of way, but in a way that forces us to look at things that are happening and say, let's be prepared, let's figure out ways to avoid this. And obviously we're here now, but there's things that we can still do, if that makes sense. And it was meant to be a series, as far as I understand, but she only wrote up to the second book, and I don't believe she finished the third. And so I'm excited to put the second book on my library requests list. It's called Parable of the Talents, and it's like set a little bit further in the future after the first book. And wouldn't you know it, they're also electing another president whose catchphrase, I'm not going to say it out loud because I don't want the algorithm to put me in any sort of spot, but it's literally the same as our current Cheeto-in-Chief. So again, this is written in the 90s. Take that information and do with it what you will. Needless to say, this was a 5-star book for me. I'm very excited to read Parable of the Talents. And if you've read Parable of the Sower, I want to talk about it with you. Really interesting, 5 out of 5 stars for me. The second book I read in February was our book club's pick, which was How to Walk Away by Catherine Center. I don't know really how to talk about this without giving spoilers, but I'm going to try as much as I can because things happen like very quickly. We follow, this is bad, I don't remember the main character's name. Maddie? Nope, wait, hold on. Margaret. I think it's Margaret. Let's double check. Margaret. Okay, I had it. And also, this is the book. This is the book where fiance is misspelled in the blurb on storygraph.
Keeps spelling fiance wrong in this blurb. It's missing an E.
And it's spelled fionk. There's no E on the end. It's just fionk. We follow Margaret. She's about to land her perfect job. She is about to be engaged to her perfect all-American boyfriend. And, you know, life's great. Life's awesome. And then something happens. There's an accident. And someone... No, it says that she's in the hospital. She is in an accident and she's in the hospital. Okay, it doesn't say what happens in this blurb, so I will not tell you. She's in the hospital. Obviously that now things are bad. And the future that she was really looking forward to is just not going to be the same. And so she's grappling with that. She's trying to heal. There's a family, kind of like a familial plot in there as well, where relationships are trying to be healed. Her perfect boyfriend is not great, actually. And then there's another love interest. If you read the premise, you'll know it's her physical therapist. So if you watched my BookTube newbie tag video, you know that I don't typically reach for romance myself. And so I would not have read this had it not been our book club's pick. It was nice to have a lighter, I mean, relatively, she's literally like in a horrible accident. Anyway, a relatively lighter book in between Parable of the Sower and my next read. That being said, I don't think I would have read it otherwise. There was a blurb on the front that really set expectations. I don't remember who blurbed it. Nina George blurbed, "If you read just one book this year, read How to Walk Away." I really wanted it to make me cry. I really wanted it to be like really heartfelt and like heart-wrenching, and it just wasn't for me. So I think I was a little disappointed, but that's just, I don't trust blurbs anymore. I just won't do it. I did appreciate the way that the healing journey was depicted as like really complicated and non-linear. That was nice. And just unfortunately didn't love any of the characters. None of them really grew on me at all during the read, and I actually found most of them annoying. So there's that. I also don't usually love romance plots that have a power imbalance, i.e. this woman and her physical therapist at the hospital that she is currently a patient in. I have one very specific exception, and it's only ever in fantasy. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't be so picky. I originally gave it a 3-star, but I'm trying to be a little bit more frugal with my ratings this year. Like, I feel like last year I looked at my list of books that I read and I was just like, how did I rate that so high? So this year I'm trying to be a little bit less like frivolous with my 5-star and my 4 stars, and even my 3 stars. So I did end up knocking this down to a 2.75. I did read it really fast. Like, I think I read it in 1 or 2 sittings. 2.5 is like middle of the road, you know? So it was just mid. I don't think I'd pick it up on my own, and I don't think I would read it again. But like I said, it was nice to have a lighter read between Parable of the Sower and my next read, which was Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Y. Davis. Angela Y. Davis is a political activist, scholar, author, and speaker. She is an outspoken advocate for the oppressed and exploited, writing on Black liberation, women's liberation, prison abolition, and international solidarity with Palestine. She is the author of several books, including Women, Race, and Class and Are Prisons Obsolete? She is the subject of the acclaimed documentary Free Angela and All Political Prisoners, and is Professor Emerita? I don't think I've ever read that word out loud before. At the University of California, Santa Cruz. So this book is a collection of speeches and interviews that took place after Michael Brown was killed in 2014 by Officer Darren Wilson of the Ferguson Police Department in Missouri, and the protests that followed. The essays, interviews, speeches, etc. address the connection between Ferguson and the conversations that were sparked then and the liberation movement for Palestine, which obviously a lot of these conversations have also been echoed and continued in and since 2020 after the murder of George Floyd. She also addresses a lot of things like the foundations and failures of progressive movements, which I thought was really interesting. Capitalism, racism, the prison industrial complex, and other global connections like apartheid in South Africa. So these are obviously very time-specific speeches and interviews and things that she gave, but they have evergreen wisdom in them, things that we can still apply to a lot of things that are going on today. 10 years later, because this was published in 2015. I have literally so many screenshots of things that I highlighted, so I'm going to read a few quotes. This is literally chapter 1, first page. Progressive struggles, whether they are focused on racism, repression, poverty, or other issues, are doomed to fail if they do not also attempt to develop a consciousness of the insidious promotion of capitalist individualism. And I also think this is really interesting because we're seeing right now a more collective response of being aware of, the companies that we're purchasing from and who they support and what sort of things they're doing. I'm filming this on March 2nd, so 2 days after the economic blackout on the 28th. And the conversations that we're seeing now, I think people are being much more aware of where they're shopping, who they're shopping from, how much they shop. Specifically, also, let's note that there was a GoFundMe going around, set up by a white man for some reason that people gave $100,000 to. So I don't know where that all came from, but why? Next quote, "It is essential to resist the depiction of history as the work of heroic individuals in order for people today to recognize their potential agency as a part of an ever-expanding community of struggle." There's so many that I want to include, but I'll just say a couple more. The important issues in the Palestinian struggle for freedom and self-determination are minimized and rendered invisible by those who try to equate Palestinian resistance to Israeli apartheid with terrorism. Play that back if you need to. Okay, this is the last quote I'm going to include because I think it's great and relevant, as many of these things are. Sometimes we have to do the work even though we don't yet see a glimmer on the horizon that it's actually going to be possible. I didn't rate this one because I don't usually rate nonfiction books like this, but I do very, very much recommend it. It was really interesting, a really interesting read. The last book that I read in February is called Smother Moss by Alyssa Allering. And I don't know why I want to say it like that, Smother Moss, but that's just the vibes. This book I read, I think, in 2 or 3 sittings. I really couldn't put it down. I just enjoyed it a lot. It's set in Appalachia. The author is from PA, but I don't believe they ever specify in the book where in Appalachia they are. It's just Appalachia. They're like in the foothills of the mountain, or like living on the mountains. It's the 80s. We follow 2 sisters that couldn't be any more different from each other. The older one, Sheila, tends to keep to herself, is really the one that takes care of the house, eldest daughter vibes, and she's bullied, and she's a little bit older than Angie by a few years, so I think that she just feels like that disconnect with her silly younger sister, and her younger sister, Angie, is like a wild child. She thinks that there's monsters. She like dresses like Rambo every day and goes out into the forest to like survive, for lack of a better, you know, like, were you ever a child and you like went and played in the trees and you pretended that you had to like make shelter and survive in the wilderness? Like, that's Angie, but like to level 100. And she also like draws these tarot-esque cards of these monsters that end up having some sort of influence on the story. So that's really fun. There's a murder that happens. And of course, Angie, you know, is like, I'm ready, take me. I can solve the mystery. And it's just great. It was just a good read. I loved the way these characters were written. They had a depth to them that I really enjoyed. They jumped off the page at me for sure. I want to describe the writing as like very tactile and almost sticky. Like, that is a word that comes to mind when I want to talk about this writing. It's like sticky. I don't know why that's the word, but my wife described this book as somewhat of a fever dream. And now that she's said that, I can't really unthink it. So it is a little bit of a fever dream in like, I think, a great way. It becomes more that way, I think, in the last third. But yeah, no, I just had a great time reading this book. It was left a little open-ended, and I think I would have preferred just 1 or 2 more answers or explanations to some of the things that were happening, like concretely. I understand why things are left open-ended. Yeah, I ultimately had a really great time reading this, even though I wish that there had been a couple more loose ends. Not even loose ends. The loose ends were just left open-ended. Like, they were all addressed open-endedly. So just be aware of that. Maybe don't go in thinking that there's gonna be a lot of answers. I gave it 4 stars. Okay, as far as March reads go, I don't actually have a ton on my list. I'm almost I'm almost halfway through Jasmine Throne. So still reading that. There were just so many more things that I had to read last month. And this one isn't due at the library yet, so I kind of have been putting it off, but I did pick it up again the other day, and now I like need to know what happens. Jasmine Throne is one of those fantasy books where you really have to lock in the beginning, and then once all the little networks and connections are established, you're like, I literally can't put this down. And you know all the lore and all the connections and everything, but the first third is a lot of names and a lot of places and a lot of perspectives. But I am already like, I know everyone. I'm very excited to how are they all connected. I'm already making the connections. So excited to get into that. Our book club pick for this month is How to Solve Your Own Murder by Kristen Perrin. I'm excited to get into this. I love a little murder mystery. Yeah, and look at that cover. It's so cute. Otherwise, my March reads are quite up in the air. I kind of want to read something springy. I'm to usher in the spring season. It's like I said earlier, it's been very sunny here the last couple days, and the flowers are starting to bloom and things are defrosting, and I feel myself starting to defrost. So it just feels like a spring book is warranted. So if you're reading anything springy or have read anything really spring-like that you would suggest, please put it in the comments because I want to add it to my TBR. If you've made it this far, I also want to know what your favorite book was that you read in February, or your least favorite book. Tell me, what's the tea? Or the book you're looking forward to reading most in March. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I'm going to go outside because it looks like it's clearing up a little bit. See you next time. Bye.